I have been ambassador to the Holy See for 10 years, which is very long, and usually you get swapped after 3 to 5 years, but around an institution like the Vatican, it can be useful to remain longer because it's a very different world. And you take a certain time to get used to the Vatican, and for them to get used to you, because they watch you very closely. When I arrived at the Holy See, I was in the lucky situation that my brother-in-law, husband of my wife's sister, was the Austrian ambassador to the Holy See. So I got a really good introduction. And one of the first things he said to me is, Edward, the Vatican is like a slightly prudish old lady. Don't rush in. Don't overwhelm them. Don't come with 1,000 ideas, but sit, watch, learn, and be humble. And that's why, it takes a while until you begin to understand this place. I thought tonight that I would, because it's a slightly, still not open, but a secret that I'm going to leave my post at the Vatican in about 2 months' time. And then I'm going to transition to the Danube Institute, which is a think tank in Budapest, and whose representative István Kiss is here tonight to listen. And so the first part of my talk is going to be about my Vatican experience, but the larger part will be about some of my future experience, because around Danube I will speak a lot about family. And I will also probably be Hungary's ambassador at large for family and church topics. So I hope to be here quite often to keep contact with the United States. What I wanted to tell you about was Pope Leo, because I suppose, I don't have to tell Americans about an American Pope, so you should tell me, but I could tell you a bit about the first impressions we have of this Pope. And I have to say, everybody is very, very happy about this new Pope. I haven't met one person who wasn't thrilled and happy and loved him, which is sometimes a warning sign. But in his case, I think they feel that we've got something quite extraordinary as a Pope. I can tell you indiscreetly, but please don't repeat it outside of this door, what your new ambassador to the Holy See told me when he met with the Pope for 40 minutes. We met last week, and he told me, he told the Pope, you know that you're very popular in the United States. You have ratings of, I think, 87% or something like that. And then he said, your president would like to have that many. So Pope Leo is incredibly popular in a very short time. And the funny thing is, he's not that jokey, folksy, he's not out to win you as a buddy. He is far more reserved than Pope Francis ever was. Pope Francis wanted to be your buddy. When you met him and you went up to him and you threw him a joke, he would take it and swirl it back even better. This one here, when you throw him a joke, he will smile and shake your hand and be very friendly, but the joke will remain on your side. So I stood in queue in line for him 2 times 6 seconds. I spoke with him. And both times my impression was very friendly and very reserved. And I think that Pope Leo is using this natural reservedness that he has, which is a bit the reservedness of an abbot of a monastery, of an abbey somewhere in the countryside. It's, he's a man. You know what he just decided, apparently? And we just learned this yesterday. He's decided that every Tuesday will be consecrated to prayer and reflection, and he'll probably pop out to Castel Gandolfo 1 day a week just to pray. Isn't that incredible? So he basically pushes all the appointments to Monday and then to the rest of the week. So on Tuesday he can be in Castel Gandolfo, outside in the countryside, and pray. So the interesting thing about him is I think that nobody really knows him. In Hungary there's a running joke about our Cardinal Erdő, that he keeps his cards very close to the chest, and you can't look into his cards. But with this man, I have the impression he has the cards under his shirt. I think that not even people who thought he knew him really knew what he thought in his heart. And I think all of that is slowly coming out, and you have the impression of somebody who has an extremely clear idea of what the papacy is. A very clear idea what the duties of a pope are. Because from the first moment on the balcony, he began a series of gestures that continued over the next weeks, where everything he did signaled to the Romans, to the Catholics worldwide, I'm going to bow my head under the yoke of my office. It's going to be about the office, not about me. It's not about Prevost. If you meet me, you meet the Pope. You don't meet Prevost, your friend, you meet the Pope. And that is after 12 years of somebody who, most of all, you met Bergoglio, you also met the Pope, or you mostly met charming Bergoglio. With him here, you meet the office. And that is very refreshing, I have to say. And he did a series of, the first 3 minutes on the balcony. I admit that I was a bit nervous when I heard the name, because I had been told by sources that he was the candidate of the American left. He was the favorite candidate of certain more left-leaning, more progressive cardinals. So when I heard the name, it was like a shock. And then he came out, and I saw that he was wearing the mozzetta. Now, which, you could say, he's wearing a vestment more or less. But for a Catholic that knows tradition, it would have been so easy to also step out in white like Pope Francis and get an easy win with the media. Humble. He's humble. And he took this step in humility to wear this old-fashioned vestment to signal to the world, I'm taking my office very, very seriously. Then, within the first 2 minutes, he had led the faithful in a prayer in a Hail Mary, and he mentioned Our Lady of Pompeii. Because it was the feast of Our Lady of Pompeii, that is one of the most important pilgrimage places for the people of Rome. So he signaled to the Roman population, I'll be a pope for you. I know. Every gesture he made showed us, I know what a pope is supposed to do, and I'm going to do that. All of that, very exciting. And then on the second day, he made a trip in his car to another Marian sanctuary, to the Our Lady of Good Counsel, and prayed there, kneeling long. And he led people in Latin prayers, which Pope Francis never did. And he sings. Pope Leo sings. Pope Francis never sang. And so I would say that from the first moment, he began with a series of very clear visual signals that told us, don't worry. I may be new at this job, but I know what I'm doing. And that is very, very relaxing, because we had quite a wild and bumpy ride over the last 10 years, 12 years, with a very creative and very surprising man at the helm. And as somebody said, but isn't he far more boring than Pope Francis? Said, after 12 years of excitement, a bit of boredom is quite good. Yes. Let me see if I have some other intelligent insight. I don't think he's going to give spontaneous interviews. I don't think he's going to make huge press conferences on flights. And whatever he says is always going to be very balanced, very balanced. He's not going to lash out against anybody or anyone. So very impressive. And very personally, I have the impression that we have a man as Pope who is deeply into prayer, who has a deep personal relationship to Our Lady, and I would say I have a feeling of someone who is striving for sanctity. This is someone who is really walking towards Christ. That's not bad to have in the current situation. Also, I have the impression of someone for whom Christ and faith are the only thing that's important, and politics are downstream from that. Pope Francis was a politician, full-blooded. He loved politics. He loved geopolitics. He knew everything about every country. He loved the game. He loved to interact with. Pope Leo signalized that he would leave the political networking to his Secretary of State mostly. So Cardinal Parolin, Archbishop Gallagher, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and that's also very good. So we're very happy with what we have right now, and we're going to see whether he will make huge steps or not at all. I would rather expect that the changes will be extremely subtle. Yes, I forgot to say, probably his central thing, apart from everything I told you now, seems to be that I think he feels that he has been elected in order to bring unity and peace to the church again, which was very polarized over the last 12 years. And with him, I don't have the feeling he will do that by giving up things, but by trying to signal from the right to the left, we can all be Catholic. We can all stay on board. I'm going to reach out with both of my arms, not just with one, and try to keep you all on board. And I think that's a very good thing. So those are my impressions about Pope Leo. And I don't have to tell you that you as Americans are privileged, because while he is the first American Pope, in a way he's not very typically American. He comes across more like a Latin American. And for me, the criterion is when he speaks Latin. It's very easy. Latin is a brilliant language, because when somebody speaks Latin, you immediately know where they're from. Immediately, because you cannot fake Latin. You will always bring your accent to it. Except if you studied for many years in Rome, then you will speak Latin like the Romans do. But if you're from anywhere else in the world, you will bring your accent. And Pope Leo doesn't say Dominus vobiscum. Pope Leo sounds like a Peruvian when he speaks Latin. And so it's going to be a very interesting ride, with God's help, a long one and a good one. Very well. So, and because I am in the future going to speak far more about family, and because the last time I was here I presented my book, The Habsburg Way, 7 Rules for Turbulent Times, which was mostly a book to present the Habsburg family and its 7 key values, which are also important for our time. I think today is a good opportunity to speak about my second book, which is far more reactionary than the first one. And my daughter translated the first book into German from English, because the original language is English. And she said, and that one is I think it's popular in Germany. They like it. I get very good feedback. She said she's terrified when I'm going to translate the second one into German, because I say rather Catholic things in there. And yeah. So the second one is called Building a Wholesome Family in a Broken World. And people have asked me, why did I write that book? On a very pragmatic level, is because Sophia Press asked me, what would you like to write your second book about? But on a very personal level, I used to be a script writer. I wrote movie screenplays for 10 years, tried to survive with my family. I'm, I think, the only diplomat to the Holy See who has written a treatment for a zombie movie. And yeah, historic movies. I've written police series, lots of things. And one of the key rules in writing, in script writing, is write what you know. And if you're a dentist, you should write a book, a thriller about a dentist, because that's something you know. Immediately, if you write about something you don't know, then you're out of your depth. So, what do I know anything about? Most of all, I know about family. And when I give talks in Europe, and I tell people that I have 6 children, they're all like, and then I came here And I came for the first time to Ivy Hall. And I'm used to people being very impressed when I speak about my 6 children. So I came here to Ivy Hall, and then I met John. And then I met other people. Then I was here for my first dinner here. And I presented myself to a young lady and said, "Hello, Edward Habsburg, married, I have 6 children." And they looked at me with a bit of pity. And the first one that I met had 9 children. And the second one had 8 children. And the look said something like, "Well, perhaps God will be generous still with you." Well, in Germany or in Austria, in Italy, I drive my own car in Rome always, my wonderful embassy Mercedes through the streets of Rome. And I remember that I drove for 3 years through the streets of Rome, and then a pregnant woman crossed on a zebra crossing. And I said, "Oh wow, beautiful, look, there's a woman expecting a baby." And then I thought for a second, and I said, "That's the first time in 3 years that I've seen a pregnant woman." And that used to be the country of children in Europe. Bambini, that's the world. That word was synonymous for Italians. They're gone. They're totally gone. You never see children in the streets. And when I walk with my family of 6 children through the streets of Rome, and the Romans all say, "Oh, sweet, how wonderful." Then I said, "You also want to have sweet?" No, it's not reasonable. It's not reasonable. Always the reaction. So the country with the biggest number of children in Europe has gone to a country with barely above the Vatican birth rate. Just a bit. Really, really very bad. So because of that, and because of looking around me and seeing that what used to be normal reality for the last 10,000 years in our history, even before Christianity, the basic facts about coming together, having children, raising them and all of that, have somehow totally and absolutely disappeared since the 1960s. Are being seen as something weird and something that hinders you from a happy life. And so I decided I'd write a little book about my experiences, because I can say after 30 years of marriage, 31 years now, and of happy marriage, I can tell people the greatest thing that you can do in the world is to get married. And the greatest thing that you will do is to get married to someone who shares your faith. And if you remember my first book, chapter 1 was called "Be Catholic and Live Your Faith." Chapter 2 was called "Get Married and Have Lots of Children." That is the summary of my new book. But what I say is, why do most people not get married to the right person? And why do most people not even get a chance to live their lives as Catholic man and wife the way the Church and God intended it? Why? And I thought a lot. I also talked to nephews and nieces and all of that. And what I found out is that most people don't even get a chance to begin a normal Catholic marriage the way we should, because you just stumble into dating in school, then you stumble into relationships, then you go from one relationship to the next. The boys do that because they're just built that way. The girls do that because they want to impress the other girls. And if you don't have a boyfriend, you're horribly uncool and ridiculous. So you have a boyfriend, and then you have the next boyfriend, and then you have the next boyfriend. And with every such experience, your chance of a lifelong, fulfilled, happy, great marriage gets smaller and smaller. That's a theory I have. But most people never hear that in their life. They just stumble along. And I believe that that's one of the first points in my book, is that you have to begin really early to transmit to your children. I mean, I'm talking to people who are mostly American Catholics and people with conservative values. If I would give the same talk that I'm giving here in Europe, I would have to be far more cautious in what I say. But I'm going to speak openly here. It's like, you have to teach your children all of these things before they set their first foot into a school. That's your time that you have to give them all those values. I don't mean that you have to teach them every detail about marital relations. Should be age appropriate, but you should instill a strong feeling of relationship is for marriage. You are looking for the right person, and the deal that I'm offering you in this book is don't go onto this dating and relationship game in those few years where everybody else feels you have to do it, and exchange that for lifelong happiness. Lifelong happiness. I think it's possible. We've experienced it that way, and many of my friends experience it that way. Thank God, 2 of my daughters got married now. Their mutual husbands were the first men in their life, and both of them are devout Catholics. And while they were engaged, they prayed the rosary across the telephone, because they didn't live together, of course. And I remember when my daughter who got married now, at the end of May, came to visit the family of her future husband for the first time, the family was shocked that she didn't stay in the room with him. And they were Catholics. So she had to explain that this is not the Catholic idea of marriage. And what I'm saying, all these things that the church has always taught, they make incredible sense. They are absolutely essential for a marriage to work. And of course, I also say that in my book is like many people read this book and they've lived very differently. They will now try to live like that. That's possible with grace. But the earlier you begin and the more you try to conform to the teaching of the church on marriage, the greater your chance on a lifelong happy marriage is. So that's what I say in this book. And then of course I have a bucket list, how to find out whether that significant other, that girl, that boy, is a potential spouse. That 5 points, bucket list. I say first that, of course, feelings are important, and you wouldn't seriously think about somebody if you wouldn't like the other person and feel attracted to that other person. But once you are at that point, before you even begin of getting closer to each other and moving towards each other, you should pull out that bucket list that I have in there and look at it. And so I say the first 2 points are essential. The first 3 points are essential, and 4 and 5 are also important, but not that important. So my first point is you should have the same faith. That can be the Christian faith. You don't have to necessarily marry a Catholic. But I say that marrying a Catholic or being a Catholic makes marriage so much easier. Because the Catholic Church has the teaching, the spirituality, and the sacraments to guide you through this incredibly personal, intense thing that is a marriage between one man and one woman. And I strongly recommend in my book that if you want to have a happy marriage, marry a Catholic and become a Catholic yourself. I just believe they give you the best tool set to have a good marriage. Now, it doesn't have to be. There are very devout, in Hungary, very devout Calvinists. There are fantastically devout Protestants. But it's easier if you share your faith. I always say men and women are so different, so incredibly different. You have a different body, different chemical setup, different brains, very different brains, different history, different wounds, different interests, different desires, everything different. But if you have faith together, you have that fire around which you can always gather. When you have a crisis with your spouse, or both are dead or exhausted, and it's not difficult to be dead or exhausted if you have a family, if you have many children, if your third and fourth child doesn't sleep and you don't sleep, and if one of the two can grab the other one, drag this person in front of an icon, of a cross, of a crucifix, and say, let's pray together. it's a miracle. It's a miracle what that does. If you can pray together, because you know that in the center of your relationship is God. It's not you and the other. You have taken God into the center. If you put God into the center, then He can do incredible miracles. So I believe, look for someone who not only has a Catholic birth certificate or baptism certificate, but for whom faith is really important, or at least who wants to embark on a faith journey. I strongly believe this is important. Because at the end, when I'm finished, you will say, well, where would I find someone that perfect today in today's world? I believe there is more and more people like that. So my first point is faith. You want to have a shared faith. The second is family. And I strongly encourage young people, before they even hold hands for the first time, I'm overdoing it here, to have that conversation. Because most people think like, we love each other, it's romantic, and we're good together, and then they just go from step to step. And they just stumble into the whole having children thing. As a Catholic, we're invited to be generous about life. That means if you get married to someone and you're Catholic and you take your marriage serious, that means to be open for children and for lots of children. I know the church has stopped a bit talking about that topic, lots of children, because they're all a bit embarrassed, because they don't want to stand out like sore thumbs from today's society, but that's the reality. You should be generous and you should be open for children. I know this also because I used to be, for 5 years, spokesman of an Austrian bishop before I became ambassador to the Holy See, and he was the bishop for bioethics and pro-life in the Austrian Bishops' Conference, Klaus Küng. So we spoke a lot about this. So you should see that your future wife, your future husband is open to a family, which means if you're open to many children, as John will be able to tell you and others, that means this will have consequences for your life. It's expensive to have lots of children. In many places, the state doesn't really help you if you have lots of children. It's tough to have lots of children. You have to make sacrifices, lots of sacrifices, and it probably will mean that you can't have a swank apartment downtown Manhattan if you have 7 or 8 children. You might have to change your job to be in a place where you can afford having a house with so many children. All of that are consequences of saying yes to the other person in a Catholic marriage the way it's supposed to be. And you have to find someone else who's ready to go that path together. And who is, as a spokesman of Cardinal Schönborn, who is a journalist and friend of mine, he has 9 children. And he told me, if I go with all of my children to the cinema, and we all go together just for one evening to the cinema, and everybody buys popcorn, you can fly for a weekend to a small island for that, right? And if you go on a holiday, how do you go on a holiday with 9 people? With which kind of vehicle do you go? And if you have a longer drive, where do you stay overnight? Do you call your friends, say, we're coming, we're 11. How many beds do you have? So all of this should be really thought through. And this is a conversation you should have with someone that you even think more seriously about, of getting serious with. And that conversation needs to be had ideally before you kiss for the first time, ideally. So yeah, it sounds very unromantic, but it all helps of realizing this is the greatest game that you're playing. And it's really, really, really worthwhile. I mean, most of those among you who are married will confirm that to me. It's the greatest gift in the world. I would, if I died tomorrow, I would say this was the greatest thing. It was all that you could do. So that's the second point. Third point is chastity. I strongly encourage people to look for and to try to live. Look for people who try to live chastity. It has become very difficult. We live in a time where we are bombarded with images, ideas, and so much filth. Everywhere we go, through our phones, from billboards, in movies, in cinema, around us with how people live. we are bombarded with so much, and I encourage, my example is always Blessed Emperor Karl. Blessed Emperor Karl, our great example in the Habsburg family, he was very happily married to a beautiful wife that he loved dearly and very much. They had 8 children in 11 years of marriage, and they loved each other dearly and very much. He was a chaste man. He, for instance, when he was in the army, he encouraged other soldiers not to be coarse, not to be unchaste. He was very clear about that. But that didn't mean he was a bore or rigid or whatever. He was nice and warm-hearted and fun, but he was very clear on that point. What I always told women is you want to have a knight. You want to have a knight in shining armor as your future husband. You want to have someone who defends you, who defends your honor, who kneels with his sword in front of your door. That kind of man you're looking for. And that's why I very strongly in my book encourage people not to live together before getting married. It's not out of being prudish. You know, people think that you have to try out whether you can live together. You have to try out whether you work good together. That's why you have to live together before you get married. It would be madness to be otherwise. And I always tell people, you have it the wrong way round. If you are a strong unity, you love each other very much, you respect, and all the other points are great, don't worry about that part. That part will work. It's about all the rest of the relationship that you have to check on first to make sure that you marry the right person. So that's why I'm saying we're living in a broken world. We're living in a world where the opposite of what is good for us is normal now. Now it's being seen as liberation, of course. People have finally freed from all these shackles that we had for centuries. But in reality, look at them. Look at them, how happy they are. Look how many of the marriages work. Look how many people identify as the craziest things since about 5 years. And it's just definitely a broken world. And that's why I'm saying these very unpopular things, also in interviews. And I'm encouraging people to live like that. I can just tell you from all my experiences and the experiences of all the couples that I know and of my children's and their friends, they all say the same thing. This is the way to get happy for your entire life. Then I have 2 more points. One of them is what I would call character. You have to check out whether you sort of fit to each other character-wise, whether you do each other good, whether when you're together you're at peace, whether when you're with the other person you enjoy spending time with, or you're just attracted to the other person but fight all the time. Not a good sign for a long-term relationship if you fight all the time. Some people think it's great, it gives spice to your relationship. I don't think so. I was like, you should be at peace when you're with each other. You should have a good way to communicate with each other. And ideally, you should be slightly different characters because then you're complementary. So you have to think about that too. And the last thing I would call circumstances and cultural elements. It's like if you're a city girl that needs her latte macchiato every day while walking to work and you fall in love with that guy who does fishing on the Orkney Islands. And you have to move to the Orkney Islands and help him mending the nets. Do you really see yourself doing that for a life? Or I say another example is you marry someone, but she is looking after her severely ill mother. It's a wonderful thing, but can you deal with that in your house? Is this something that fits to you and your character? Are you able to do that? Or you find someone who's absolutely wonderful, but he has really terrible problems with depression. Are you able to deal with that? You know, these things, what I call circumstances. Think well about those 2. And I say if you have those 5 points, but if the first 3 are good, then you have a pretty good chance that this is going to be a long and happy and fulfilling marriage. Yes. So what I then also say is, how far are we? Oh, goodness gracious. Yes. What I also say is then I speak. Well, the book ends rather early because I said the moment you have a few children, you don't need my advice anymore. Up to that point, we're all beginners. the moment that you have children and then small children on top of that, as Istvan will know, you know how these things work. You don't need advice anymore. So I have a few closing chapters on how to deal with age, with death in the family. And I always spice that up with, I'm going to show you the book. Can I have it for a second? So it's very visibly a book about the Habsburg family, because this is the Habsburg palace, of course. And if you look at it very closely under light, you will see that you have the entire family of Otto Habsburg in the background, very discreetly hidden here. Yes. So I spice up that book with stories from Habsburgs, from history, who lived these values. I give examples for very chaste, but at the same time very cool Habsburg emperors. I give examples for principles of children's education. It's very, very much fun. The Habsburgs have one chapter called The Habsburgs and Homeschooling. And that's, of course, very provocative when I'm going to translate it into German, because in Germany you get arrested and go to prison if you homeschool. So I have to be very careful how I formulate that in the German version. But the Habsburgs, of course, did homeschooling because, of course, there were no public schools when the Habsburgs in the 16th, 17th, 18th century raised their children in the palace with teachers. And we have their exact curriculums of what every young Habsburg man or woman learned, how their weeks were built up, what they did in the morning, what they did in the afternoon, which classes. And so I strongly encourage people to think about how to raise your children, how to pass on your values to your children, how to make sure that they learn everything that they need to know before they get exposed to public school and the ideas. And I always say that the best gift, the greatest gift you can give your children is many siblings. Because having siblings gives you a security that's incredible. My children tell me that. To know that I have siblings that have my back. To know that if my parents die tomorrow in a car crash, I will not fall. But I've got an entire gang around me that knows me, that loves me. Yes, of course, we fight from time to time, but we know we have each other's back. That knowledge, and also you as you know, sometimes parents come with these ideas. We're going to teach our children this by doing this in the morning and this in the afternoon, and then they have to have history lessons. Most of those things go automatically if you have elder siblings, because children much rather learn things from their siblings than from their parents. So my father always used to say, children don't do what you tell them to do, they do what they see you do. And that's how it works with siblings. I would say that the majority of my younger children took their cues about faith life from their elder sisters. They also watched their father and their mother, but they saw that their elder sisters pray the rosary in the afternoon, and that they go to Mass also sometimes during the week, even when the parents are not around. And that is something desirable for younger siblings. They look up to that. And I believe the greatest gift that two spouses can give each other is a large family. The greatest gift that you can give to the children is a large family. And the greatest gift that a family can give to the state is a large family. Because children that grow up in a large family have learned to share. They've learned to look out for the weakest person in the room. They've learned to see if someone is suffering. In our family, for instance, when you get food on the table, the youngest always got first. So the elder learned that you have to first look after the weaker members of the family. You learn that you're not the center of the universe. You learn that you're not entitled to the latest iPhone every year. You can't afford that if you have a large family. You have to share computers. And I know many families that hate that. They hate it. They would love to have the latest iPhone. The children especially. It's embarrassing to share computers, but you learn so much for your life. And these are people who are ready to engage in society and to engage as active members of society. So I'm telling countries, you should help your families. And it's the moment when I come to Hungary, where I'm ambassador. Hungary has been developing since about 15 years an entire structure of measures to encourage families to have lots of children. When you land in Budapest, you get out of the plane, you walk through the airport, and you see posters everywhere. Hungary, family-friendly country. Pictures of families with several children. And that is an image of the measures that our government is taking. That goes from tax exemptions. After a certain number of children, women don't pay taxes anymore, ever in their life. The state will help you to buy a new family van. The state will pay a part of your new family van. You get help and subsidies for building houses. You get very low income tax rate if you have 3 children. I profit from that because I have 6 children. And a whole series of things like that to encourage now. Does that mean that all Hungarians automatically have lots of children? No, of course not, because you are working on changing an attitude that was there for decades before and still comes out of the time of communism. So very slowly people are coming around. So it's like a huge ship going in one direction that's slowly coming. Hungary has changed the demographic freefall, which other countries still haven't done. And it's possible. But I always feel that in order to really have large families, it helps to have faith. I believe that if you believe that God will not drop you, even if the state drops you at some point, then you will be courageous and have large families. Good. I think I've said most of the important things from my book. I want to end with an example of how to be a good example as a father. I believe that we live in a time where fathers are missing everywhere. Many families grow up without the father being present. And here's an example of a Habsburg father. I'm not going to speak about Blessed Emperor Karl, because that's easy. That's very easy. He was perfect in, like Mary Poppins, perfect in practically every way. If he would have had that measure, I'm going to speak about someone who's absolutely not perfect. And that was the husband of Empress Maria Theresia. Empress Maria Theresia, 16 children. And he was called Franz of Lorraine. And he became her husband. And since then, the Habsburgs are called Habsburg-Lorraine. Because she was the only daughter. And her father negotiated with all the princes of Europe that she could continue the family. By taking her husband's name and adding it at the end of her name, continue the Habsburg family. So he was from Lorraine, and he was the only Freemason in the Habsburg family that we know about, but I think he was the only one. And which led to him being, yes, he was Catholic, yes, he went to Mass, of course, you did, but he was not very outspoken about his faith. When he spoke about his faith, it was a bit more gentle humanism. It was like, be nice to each other. He was very critical of priests, of the Jesuits sometimes. He wasn't what you call a shining beacon of faith light in his family. His wife was, very much. Maria Theresia, nearly too much. She micromanaged into her daughters' lives by writing letters every day, how they're supposed to say their prayers and when to get up and how fast to kneel down. She was overdoing it a bit. And her children were a bit terrified of her letters when they arrived. He was the contrary. He was like a teddy bear, very friendly, very nice. But there was one topic where he was the ultimate example to his family. And that was confession. Now, nobody likes to go to confession. Nobody's a great fan. And especially in Europe, it's a sacrament that is dying out in many parts of Europe because priests don't offer it, people don't go, everybody's happy. And well, that's a problem, because if you go to communion and you're in a state of sin, that's a serious problem. Nobody knows that anymore, but that's Catholic teaching. So Maria Theresia writes in one of her letters on the extraordinary circumstances of her husband's life later, after his death. And she said that to one of her children, said, "Do you remember that your father always told you there is a battle going on for your soul between the angel and the devil? They fight for your soul. And in order to win this fight, you have to go regularly to confession." He went to confession every week. Sunday morning before Mass, he went to confession. And he regularly spoke to his children about the necessity to go to confession. They saw their father going to confession once a week, and ad nauseam, they couldn't hear it anymore. So often he told them, go to communion often, but most of all go to confession, because your soul is a battlefield, and you want to have the sacrament. It's incredible, because he wasn't that much of a speaker on Catholic, but that topic was very serious. And Maria Theresia writes in her letter to her children, and therefore the most extraordinary thing happened when he died. So Franz of Lorraine died after going to the theater. He died so quickly that he couldn't get a priest anymore. He went to a theater, he felt unwell, he went home, and immediately when he arrived at home, he died. No priest, no sacraments, nothing. Now you would say that's terrible, but Maria Theresia said, God gave him the grace to die on a Sunday. He had gone to Mass and to confession a few hours before his death. And she said that was God's thank you for him always having been an example to you children. And therefore, and then she began a long letter exhorting them to go regularly to confession. Yeah. Okay, I think that's enough for today. I'm open for questions. If you want to ask questions, please go ahead, and thank you for your interest.